to be made, so much opportunity.
I
It's
would
insane.
not be doing this, guys, if the value was not ridiculous. This is insane. This is like, Motley and all the older guys say, a couple years older than me, they're just like, I missed an opportunity or two that could have been life changing.
Yep.
And I say, I will hold the line here. I'm not missing shit.
I missed out on everything. I got in I didn't have access to much capital at the time, but like 2 days before the sacrifice ended for PulseX, and before I even got into Hex, I was like, okay, well, this is ending. I will figure out how to get into Hex in a moment, but let me get into PulseX first.
Now, the last 2 days, was that the volume multiplier phase, or was that at the tail end? Because it was a much longer sacrifice phase for PulseX.
It was 1.75. 1.75.
Okay, so yeah, and this was tricky, right? Too, and this is something you had to be careful with Pulsechain sacrifice phase. It was kind of okay to do that. You got a little worse rate than you did during the flat volume multiplier phase, where it was 10,000 to 1. But the sacrifice days, the compounding was only, by the end of it, I think it was like, I can't remember, 10 days, or it came out to essentially you had a 2x working against you. Whereas, unfortunately, with PulseX, it was a much longer sacrifice period. The bonding curve went out much longer, so you have 5% compounding, and it ramps up very quickly. So the very tail end days of PulseX, you were looking at like a 9 to like 10x working against you, and then you had the 1.75x to counter a little fraction of that, but you had a lot working against you. So probably not the worst thing. Again, it depends where we start off, and then overall picture is probably okay. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I have a question that somebody asked me on somewhere. I think this is YouTube, and I'm going to pull this up, and I'll have you go through and answer this question, because I think there's a lot of people.
I'll ask the question so I can speak. No, I don't. I just need to make sure my throat's still working. Thanks for the content. This is from I won't say his name. Thanks for the content. I got in on PulseX sacrifice, but missed out on the Pulse sacrifice, and I think that's a lot of people had that go on. Think I should 1-for-1 PulseX for Pulse during the first 48 hours, or just try to DCA some capital into Pulse for the first few weeks, months of launch? I'll answer this quick, and then Motley can give a more long-form answer. I do not agree with chasing. I don't think chasing works. I think when you think you have a play on something, whales have thought of that play 3 times already. And it's mine as well. If you're just an average player, get a nice position, make sure your fiat's coming in strong if possible, and just start to DCA. Because again, we're so early, guys. It's disgusting how RH can make us feel like FOMO before something comes out, because he's so good at marketing. Like literally,
you feel like
we're
you
all like, I
already.
missed out on Pulsechain, and I sacked day 1.
That's good.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like
great marketing.
The marketing is he's ahead of you guys, me included. Like, he's clearly a few years ahead of us as far as knowledge in the space. And his marketing really represents that to me, because the sentiment in the community is like, I'm running out of time and we have not started yet. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
What are your thoughts, Molly? On that question.
Yeah. So on that question, couple things. So the first, we'll probably
should he exchange 1-for-1 for Pulse from PulseX, and then or just DCA into Pulse?
Yeah. So this is a couple things with this to kind of unpack. So first 24 to 48 hours is probably not going to be an actual bridge in place, just again for the zero valuation, tax purposes. So everything's going to be trading on a ratio, right? Well, first of all, we'll even be able to get a 1-to-1 ratio. Maybe
what does
not,
that
right?
mean, trading on a ratio, if you don't?
So the ratio, what he just described, was essentially you're able to do an even trade, right? Like, I'm able to trade you one PulseX for 1 Pulsechain. So we're getting 1-to-1, like, so even value essentially across the board. Will he even get that ratio? I think probably not. And if he does, it'll probably be fleeting. I think we probably quickly see the ratio swing where you have to do multiple PulseX for Pulsechain. So I think it could be like a 1 to 3, 1 to 5. The ratio could get nuts. And so this is where you have to be careful, right? Because trading is tricky. It's even trickier when you're doing on ratios. If he gets a 1-to-1, I honestly don't see too much harm in it, right? You're just doing one pulse chain for one PulseX. Probably not going to do too much damage.
True.
Again, you got to think of the long-term horizon. Are you just holding these coins? Okay, if you're getting a 1-to-1 and you're happy to trade 1-for-1 on the coins, that's fine. Now, what gets dangerous is, let's say, because kind of what we talked about earlier, people feel like they miss out on pulse chain. They sacrifice extra for PulseX to make up for it. They just didn't sacrifice enough for pulse chain. I think we're going to see the ratio swing wildly in favor of, essentially, it's going to cost them a lot more PulseX to get one pulse chain. And we don't know the value. We won't know the value until the ramp comes on. And you could be getting a horrible value, right? Let's say you're trading 5, 10 PulseX for one pulse chain. Prices come out and they're even, right? You're essentially at like a 5-10x loss. Again, these are all kind of short-term stuff, but ratio trading is just very dangerous. Trading in general is dangerous. You just get left behind. My overall consensus in like game theory as far as this goes is the whole Richard Heart ecosystem and the tokenomics and everything just makes sense, right? Like I think it's by far the superior system that exists out there. So all I'm ever going to do is you will always have an asset on the Richard Heart ecosystem that's going to be in the process of pumping tremendously. And then you'll have another asset that is dipping. So you can take a very, very, very small percentage of what's pumping and you can reallocate it into whatever assets it's dipping. Because again, for me, my thought process is long term, all these are going to do tremendously. So I can increase my position in bags by taking whatever's doing the best at the time and then reallocating a small portion of that into what's doing the worst of the time. So to maximize your allocations, right, as you go throughout time. So that's kind of my thought process. Just be careful with ratios, especially before the bridge goes on. If he's getting a 1-for-1 and he just wants more pulse chain, he's willing to give up PulseX, that's fine. If he's having to give up 5, 10 PulseX for one pulse chain, he might be getting a really raw deal. And if he just waited for the bridge to come out, he might have been able to get a better deal.
Because you see that reverse, right? You see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it reverses for sure.
So you seem to be like, and I'm just inferring, like more bullish on PulseX than Pulse, and you're most bullish on Hex, or at this point it doesn't matter because that's just like going to be
like his position is going to have his, you know what I mean?
It's all about how you frame it too, right? Like what time are we talking? Like again, like I'm just going off what I see. I think people feel like they don't have enough pulse chain. I think that'll be our first. To me, I just see them as opportunities, right? I think the fact that people feel like they need more pulse chain, that's going to be my first opportunity to buy more PulseX, right? PulseX is going to have faster burning. It's going to have more buybacks. It has single-sided staking that saves you from a permanent loss. Ultimately, everything has to run through PulseX. Remember, it's the heart of the new ecosystem.
Question on the burning thing. So,
yep.
From my understanding, if there's a transaction on PulseX, that causes also a transaction on Pulse.
If there's a transaction on Pulse,
because it's the main net underneath it.
If you need to use it for gas,
yes, I believe so.
Right. So wouldn't that also mean there's going to be?
I think it's just got to burn at a higher rate. So 22% of the fees. K4K is better with all the numbers, so I don't want to misspeak. But I think PulseX will still have a much higher burn rate, I believe. But I could be wrong. But you know what also goes hand in hand with that? Pulse Chain doesn't have the buyback feature, and then PulseX does. So all that's getting burned, it's gonna buy back that PulseX, and then it burns it. So it's
impossible.
It has an intro
added tokenomics. What's that?
Well, I thought there was a 25%.
25% of the fees for Pulse Chain will be burned. So whatever the fee is, 25% of that will be burned. The rest will be allocated to the validators and the people that delegate. And then, so 25% of the fees will be burned. On PulseX, 22% of the fees will be used to buy PulseX, and then that PulseX will be burned.